VRRP is extremely similar to HSRP, both in the configuration as well as how it operates. But terminology is quite a bit different when we're dealing with VRRP. For example, with HSRP, we had the active forwarder and then the standby device. With VRRP, we have the master, which is the same as HSRP's active forwarder, and we have backup devices within the group. With HSRP, the virtual IP address could not be the same as the IP address of a device in the subnet. So as a result, it had to be a unique IP address, whereas with VRRP, you can configure the virtual IP address as one of the IP addresses that are on one of the router's interfaces. So in this example, when you look at the virtual router group, it is 10.0.0.1. Router A has that particular IP address associated with its interface. And because that is true, Router A automatically increases its priority to 255, the maximum value. Therefore, it becomes the virtual router master, because by default, all the other routers would have a priority of 100. So Router B in this case had its priority manually changed to 200. Whereas Router C, its priority has been untouched. Now, let's say your virtual router group was an address that didn't belong to any of these routers. So let's say it was 10.0.0.4. Well, since it doesn't belong to any of these routers within the VRRP group, then the election process as to who will be the virtual router master comes down to strictly priority. So if all the routers had the same priority of 100, then the router with the highest IP address on the interface in the group would become the virtual router master. So it would be Router C if all the priorities were the same. However, if Router B had the higher priority, then it would become the virtual router master for that group. And that only applies if the virtual router IP address is not the IP address of one of the interfaces on the device. So remember, if it is the same as one of the interfaces, that is the router. That becomes the virtual router master. Timers exist as well for VRRP. However, the timers are a little more aggressive by default. With HSRP, the timers were 3 seconds for the hello and 10 seconds for the hold time. Well, with VRRP, we're dealing with 1 second for the hello time and 3 seconds for the hold time. But we can fine-tune these on our Cisco devices down to millisecond values if we need aggressive convergence. Pop quiz time, everybody. It's time for you to identify who the virtual router master will be for the VRRP group based on the virtual router group IP address that I specify. So let's take a look at an address here, 10.0.0.4. Based on this virtual router group IP address that will be configured on all of these routers, which one of these routers is the virtual router master? Well, in this case, since none of these routers own that IP address, it's the router with the highest priority. The priority being 110 for router B. So this is the master router, and this is the backup, and this is the backup. Always remember that for VRRP, preemption is enabled by default. So since it's enabled by default, the device with the higher priority will always become the virtual router master. We need another example now. Let's go with the IP of 10.0.0.1. So this is the IP address that is used for the virtual router group. Who will be the virtual router master? Router A, Router B, or Router C? Well, the answer to this one is Router A. And you might be thinking, wait a second, it has a priority of 100, and you just stated the router with the higher priority always becomes the virtual router master. Yes, and that is still true here. because when the virtual router group IP address is the same as one of the addresses in the group, the priority of that device changes. It's now 255. So since it's 255 now, router A is the virtual router master, router B's backup, and so is router C. So keep these two differences in mind when you're working with VRRP. Virtual router group address, if it belongs to a router, it changes its priority to 255. We have the master based on that IP address. If it doesn't belong to any of the routers, that virtual router group IP address, it's the router with the highest IP address based on the configured parameters and because preemption is enabled by default.